All right, and welcome to our first episode of Spatial Workplaces. This is a very special episode, not only because it's our first, but because we have with us Tripp Corbett. Tripp, why don't you give us a little background on yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Tripp Corbett. I'm the NASA and Federal Communications Commission account manager at Esri. I come to the sciences team at Esri from the defense team, where I managed some of the Air Force facilities, along with some of the other account management staff there once upon a time, and even HHS. So I've had a fun career here at Esri, where I've worked with a number of different accounts, so I have to mention them all because they're all great users.
Sure, awesome. Yeah, and you talked about a couple at federal agencies, and so are you working out of one of the DC offices?
I am. I keep trying to get them to send me to Miami, but they know where our customers are because we're a spatial company. So I'm in the Tyson's office. Right?
Okay, cool. And how do you like the Tyson's office? I've never been before.
It's a good office. It is a little bit tricky to get to at certain times of the day because Tyson's actually has more square footage of office space than DC does. A lot of folks don't know that. So there are a lot of cars and not a particularly well-designed grid. But the office itself is nice.
Interesting. And so do you sit next to your colleagues, or what's the office like there? And are you traveling around your campus a lot to find your colleagues and collaborate?
It's tricky because aside from Redlands, where we are now, DC is actually our largest other office.
Oh, really?
Kind of our East Coast headquarters, as we on the East Coast like to call it. We've got about 600 people split between two buildings, each 4 floors with different wings. So it's tricky to find where people are and kind of understand where everyone is coming from in the office. I sit by my peers, so I sit by the account managers for our other accounts that use GIS for facilities like the Department of Energy and HUD and others.
Okay.
But I don't necessarily sit by the resources that I'm engaging throughout the day. So as an account manager, my job is to support the users and make you all successful, and also coordinate a wide variety of resources, Bo being one of them, and specialists here at Esri to answer your questions, which always seem to be beyond my knowledge. I've got great customers that are always pushing the bounds of things. So while I sit by my peers, I don't always sit by the large network of colleagues that I'm engaging with throughout the day to get my customers' questions answered.
Sure. And that kind of segues nicely into what this podcast is all about, which is our facilities, our workplaces, and the new product that we're building, ArcGIS Indoors, and helping people navigate those spaces. Would you mind talking a little bit about what about ArcGIS Indoors excites you?
Sure. Because I have to coordinate so many folks at Esri, there are occasionally people that I need to stop by and say, hey, let's talk about this email that you haven't got back to me on.
Sure.
Just this morning, I used it to go track down one of our dev colleagues who I needed some virtualization testing information from for one of my users.
Yeah.
And I am here on Redlands. We've got a lot of different buildings here on Redlands campus, most of the letters of the alphabet, and I didn't exactly know where that individual sat. So
sure.
So that was how I went and tracked that individual down this morning. But I'm sure as folks can imagine, Esri is also a very spatial company, but we're inherently visual thinkers. So because of that, we're always looking for rooms like this one with nice big whiteboards.
Sure.
Which are actually in finite quantity in Tyson. So it's funny because we're always trying to find, which conference room is open for which time, and can everybody get there during that time? Esri being a global company, there are usually kind of magic half hours or hours that works for people in different parts of the globe. So then all the conference rooms are taken at that time or something like that. So it's tricky to find the conference rooms and find something that's accessible to everyone, because we've got facilities that are a little bit more controlled in DC. So you've got to take into account, all right, well, who's coming to this meeting, who's allowed to get to this room, things like that. So to me, the ability to find colleagues, the ability to find conference rooms and understand their availability are all things that I'm excited about for ArcGIS Indoors. But you've probably got some inside knowledge on something that I don't know about, maybe?
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know that Nitin would be too happy with me sharing anything too publicly at this point. But you're touching on a couple of key value propositions there initially. When we talk about engaging with occupants in the workforce and helping them stay engaged in their work, collaboration is key at this day and age. A lot of organizations are much more cross-functional and more horizontal and distributed. So they need the ability to kind of explore the spaces. I use ArcGIS Indoors every day on our campus here because I'm over in O, I'm over in M, I'm over in W, and, I don't know where everyone sits in all of those buildings. So
especially with our open floor plans in a lot of those buildings now.
Yeah, so, being able to find where they sit, and then if I'm scheduling a meeting with someone over there, I want to schedule it conveniently for them because I'm requesting their time. So, being able to find conference rooms near them. And like you said, making sure that there are amenities such as whiteboards or TVs to display on. Those are all key values of the product to me. So, really excited for that when it comes out in Q4. And I think that a lot of our users are going to be able to make a lot of use of it. But kind of getting away from that a little bit, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of your work you've done with NASA, for example. They're using GIS for facilities at some of their, what are they called, research centers? I'm not sure. I don't work with NASA so closely. So would you give us a little background on that?
So if you look into the history of NASA, the different centers were dedicated towards different things. So some were dedicated towards testing, others research, others actual launch facilities and flight facilities. A lot of folks forget that the first A in NASA is for aeronautics. So a lot of people think NASA, rockets, but NASA technology is in our lives every day. A lot of folks don't realize the advancements in technology that they are doing for things like our cell phones or our hot water heaters or things like that they're already working on for space.
Right.
That then they transition and make available for commercial innovation. So NASA's centers are varied in their focus. NASA has 12 centers stratified around the country, many by the coast, so that if something they are testing does not necessarily go well, it doesn't land on a populated area.
Sure.
But they've got 12 centers.
Thanks to them for that.
Yeah. They've got 12 centers, and each of those kind of work as their own nexus to a degree. They work with headquarters, but they're also, the kind of culture at NASA is inherently independent. Let's do it. And so the headquarters folks actually have a very interesting time trying to manage all of the innovation and focus it. It's kind of like driving a rocket to steer the organization.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of brilliant people working there, I'm sure. So a lot of innovative ideas coming out. And so with that background, there's an interesting blog post coming out it actually came out a few weeks ago now, about what NASA is doing at their Langley facility.
Mm-hmm.
Would you want to go into a little bit of detail on what you can find in that blog post, or maybe some of the things that weren't highlighted in that blog post that we can talk about?
Sure. So NASA Langley is one of NASA's 12 facilities, and it's actually one of their most, if not the most, advanced user of GIS at NASA. GIS is used within what NASA encompasses as center operations directorates.
Mm-hmm.
So these guys are not only responsible for the facilities, but they're responsible for the utilities and the operations and maintenance of the center to keep the lights on and keep the scientists focused on the science and not on some type of facility issue distracting them.
Right.
So NASA Langley Center Operations Directorate has over 300 applications for their thousands of residents on center that receive millions of hits a year. NASA Langley is a really interesting environment because that team has to work very hard with all of their immediate proximity stakeholders. So there are the city governments, the county governments, Joint Base Langley Eustis, so from the Air Force, and Army. So the interesting thing here is that they've got a lot of external partners to the center that are affecting things on center. So the city and the county and others are dictating stormwater and wastewater treatment that needs to be done.
Okay.
They are dealing with a watershed that includes some of these surrounding vicinities. NASA Langley, like a lot of NASA's facilities on the coast, inherently have to deal with sea level rise because they're at such low elevations that definitely affects them. So they are looking at NOAA tidal gauges and storm forecasts and models and things like that to understand, all right, well, what buildings are threatened by sea level rise, and how can we ensure that we are building in a safe manner as we move forward, renovating the right buildings, and understanding which buildings we should target for demolition. So it's really interesting because NASA Langley uses GIS for all of these things to kind of handle all of these operations and these complex relationships on the center. And so that team, they not only have to handle that, but they also work with all the contractors on the center. A lot of folks don't realize how many contractors NASA has.
Right.
So they use that GIS to equip their contractors to be able to do things like landscaping. That's a famous example from their retired GIS account manager.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's really quite interesting because what you're touching on is a lot of the facility operations are influenced by environmental variables that need to be modeled and understood in order to be managed. You talked about them using 3D on their site. I know that you had mentioned they do some flood modeling on their site, but when we talk about 3D, we're generally talking about some of the more innovative ways people are applying GIS today. 3D is becoming much more common, but there are some other things that are starting to pop up, like GeoAI, as well as IoT, and those things inextricably connected. So, are you excited for anything in those realms? Can you tell us a little bit about what your thinking is in those spaces?
Well, I think you're right in that the move to 3D is amongst us. I think as we look at that curve of early adopters versus kind of general populace versus kind of late adopters, we're definitely starting to see the majority of folks move towards that extrusion of their 2D data into 3D.
Sure.
And I think that part of that is us finally providing tools to help them do that. ArcGIS Indoors being one for the interior of buildings.
Right.
But also ArcGIS Pro's ability to do the 2D and 3D side by side natively very quickly. And so I think that is kind of going along with the migration of ArcGIS Pro as well as the evolution of our 3D web tools. So the good news is that is happening, and in certain situations it's actually driving an awareness of these other innovative things that you just mentioned, like IoT and AR, VR, of how do we move into 3D? How do we need to move into 3D so that we can do these things in the future properly with less work? So that's where their account manager comes in. Those are some of the questions that I have to brainstorm with them and try to help them answer, because moving into 3D, it's not just the walls and windows like this one.
Right.
It is the utilities inside the walls. So are we using the latest utility network model? Are we properly connecting those networks together? Are we beginning to connect to our sensor networks and our industrial control systems so that we can monitor everything that's going on in a truly 3D pattern? To a degree, they were doing this in 2D before. There are great examples of them tying into their industrial control systems and utilities and things like that in 2D. But 3D is really helping that to come to life, especially when you look at how complex the utilities networks are inside of spaces and facilities and subterranean areas. Sure. I think that's where the new utility network data model and the new utility network management server complement ArcGIS Indoors and are kind of synergizing that adoption and connection to the IoT. The Internet of Things is something that I think is critically important to GIS, because all of a sudden you now are getting live feedback into the authoritative data layers that you've already had and have already been looking at. And through understanding what is going on in that moment, you are no longer making assumptions about what might be going on. Right. Because assumptions introduce risk into the process. Risk can result in disruption or a security threat or something like that, for instance, for those that are using it for corporate security.
Right.
So the connection to the IoT is very exciting. It's kind of happening in 2D and 3D. 3D is really accelerating the interest in alternate and augmented reality and virtual reality, though, as you mentioned, because all of a sudden I need to understand what is inside that wall, what is below this walkway.
Right.
And frankly, if I had to bet money on where Esri is headed in the near future, is supporting rendering pipelines in our SDKs, our software development kits, to augmented reality clients. Because I think that the augmented reality holds some more immediate value, especially for our facilities customers, than the full virtual reality does.
Okay.
For instance, if I could X-ray this wall and see, all right, there's a pipe there and there's an electrical conduit there, and oh, that's where the internet line is, then I don't need to rip open this entire wall to get to the internet line to run new cable to increase the bandwidth or something like that. I might just need to kind of cut up in it, which can save money on remodeling, patching, and everything like that.
Right.
So that especially becomes important when you're looking subterranean at pipes and valves and where is this stuff. High accuracy GPS is something that we haven't talked about, but it is something that is now supported in the mobile apps. So it's exciting because now centers like NASA, who were maybe built 40, 50 years ago, who have a rough idea of where that valve might be. It's somewhere in this 10-foot range.
Right.
If I had augmented reality, I might be able to say, all right, well, here's where the GIS says it should be based on our ground targeting or scanning or something like that. So let's dig right here rather than dig up this whole foot trench.
Right.
And then they're using the high accuracy GPS to recollect that and refine and really get their networks highly accurate. So the augmented reality, I think, has a lot of immediate value. And I think we're very excited to see some of our Esri startups and partners and others who will be at UC come to user conference, developing clients from those to begin to work with that data, especially as we pour more support into the SDKs to support those partners. So I think that augmented reality is coming very soon. I think that virtual reality is something that we're working toward, because you're not going to want to be in one of those storm mandrains kind of bear crawling through it. You're going to have a little RC rover down there. And that's where a full virtual reality picture, as you're assessing the pipe condition or something like that, or a crawl space or something in a building, could become very useful. So you mentioned the IoT, you mentioned the AR, VR, the GeoAI piece is something that's huge. It has a lot of potential for prediction and moving GIS into understanding what will happen based on the huge set of historical data that a lot of these facility managers and portfolio managers and everyone has.
Sure.
And now, kind of through the 10.5 and 10.6 releases, we've really begun to handle that bigger data better and be able to slice and dice and analyze it. So by being able to work with that big data and now applying the machine learning and AI tools that are already in ArcGIS Pro, as well as different open source libraries through Jupyter notebooks and things like that, we're beginning to be able to project forward with GIS, which in a day like this of constrained budget environments and not really wiggle room for unexpected repairs and things like that becomes critically important.
Right.
We've got great partners like OSIsoft who are already helping us with condition-based maintenance, and I think that this the GeoAI piece begins to take it forward. It also begins to look at kind of helping your staff be more productive and do more fun things. And I know I didn't say AI is going to replace people's jobs. Like, don't panic, everybody.
I was just seeing the other day, actually, that there was a study done that showed that AI might actually create more jobs.
Yeah. Well, here's an example. So if you saw FedGIS Plenary this year, you might have seen my colleague Alberto show an operations dashboard that was connected to a camera network. Of an intersection that was monitoring the vehicles, the people, the trucks, the school buses that crossed through that intersection so that they could understand how busy it was and who was crossing through that intersection. When you scale that to the amount of cameras that a single NASA facility has, which could be hundreds or thousands, or even NASA as a whole, that becomes way too much for a single person or even a group of people to be constantly watching all of these cameras and understanding what is happening.
Right.
But if you begin to apply the machine learning and the GeoAI to watching those video feeds and doing those counts and then updating your operations dashboard, all of a sudden that person doesn't need to stress out about switching between a bunch of different cameras. They can see what the cameras are reporting, they can see what the exceptions are, and they can make more informed decisions.
Right.
So where it really comes down to is helping us work more efficiently and not head on fire all the time.
Yeah, and more in more securely. I mean, that's when you are talking about being able to analyze and pull out features from video feeds of security cameras. I mean, I can only imagine that makes the facility more safe, right? Is that what they're? How are they applying that?
Sure. With some of our newer tools like Insights, you can even begin to do link analysis amongst the badge access scanners.
Sure.
So not only understanding from the videos who is coming and going and what is going on, but understanding from the badge scanners, all right, well, what is happening here? And you can even begin to tap into other networks in your corporate IT structure of, all right, who is this person talking to all the time? Why are they in 20 buildings today, kind of thing?
Right.
Are they a custodial staff member who should be in 20 buildings today, or is something up? So I think that it's really going to help us in the areas of corporate security as well as management of and operations of the facilities themselves. An example of that where they have begun to connect and kind of mirror the Internet of Things pattern with understanding kind of live what is happening is with NASA's barges. So they're beginning to look at, all right, well, what is coming in proximity to these? What severe weather might be affecting these? So it's really interesting to see how they're beginning to deploy those different patterns in different areas. There is one other area that you didn't mention that I think is going to become a little bit easier to work in the future as the regulations settle out, and that's working with UAS or unmanned aerial systems, drones, and using those to understand facility condition and even accurately capture the facades. So understanding, what is the thermal signature of this roof during winter? Okay, wow, we're losing a lot of heat right there. That's costing us a lot of money. If we had the ability to kind of restore or repair one roof, that's the one. That would capture us the most cost savings the quickest. So I think that my NASA folks are very excited to begin to be able to use their UAS with their GIS, both in near real time as well as in real time with direct feeds from the UAS coming into their ArcGIS. So I think that GeoAI, AR, VR, and IoT are important, and I think we'll even see UAS coming around.
Yeah, well, of course, you're always very forward-thinking. So I do want to thank you again for joining us. Just to kind of start to wrap up here, being that you're so forward-thinking, what are you excited about next?
What am I excited about next? ArcGIS has, as part of that move to 3D, has a lot of 3D analysis tools coming down the pipeline.
Okay.
So the ability to do 3D cross-sections is something that's coming in Pro 2.2 next month, June. So being able to understand subterranean profiles, intra-wall profiles, so being able to kind of do those 3D cross-sections, I think is something that's coming in the immediate future that folks can look out for. I would also say that I am working with the NASA scientists, as are my colleagues with NOAA and the other scientific governmental organizations and commercial organizations that are providing Earth observation data and things like that, to put more data out there through the ArcGIS marketplace and other channels that can help center operations and facility staff better manage their portfolios and assess their risk and their operations. When I first came to NASA, I asked the center operations folks, I said, all right, well, what do you guys do for all these scientists that are on center all day? And they said, oh, well, we do this, this, and this. And I said, all right, well, what do they do for you? And they laughed and they said, that's not how it works. But I said, but it could be, because I work with everyone at NASA, and I talk with all these scientists, and they're like, oh yeah, we've got solar suitability models. I could tell you what the lightning signature is going to be, or the flooding potential, or modeling, or something like that. And I'm like, are you passing this to your strategic infrastructure division? Are you passing this to your center operations division? No, this is all just research. I'm like, but they could use this.
Yeah.
So it's exciting, because we're beginning to. I think the scientists are really beginning to realize, like, hey, there are a lot of applications of our data,
Sure.
and facilities is one of them. And I keep trying to tell them, and it's an exciting one.
Right.
So I think that one of the things that I'm looking forward to, and that things that folks will see a little bit later in the year, are some Earth observation services coming out as WCS-enabled image services. That facilities and operations staff will be able to pull into their GIS and understand kind of what is happening on a micro and a macro scale around their operations and facilities.
Sure, that sounds very exciting. So thanks for sharing that, and thanks again for joining us today.
Of course.
And will you be at UC?
I will be at UC.
Okay.
Come by and see us
Find
in
them
the
at
Earth
UC.
Sciences neighborhood.
Awesome. Thanks again, Tripp.
Absolutely.
And thank you all for joining us.